Chapter 21. Kepler. It was chaos. Guests were everywhere. Ambulances lined the drive. Staff were trying to hand out foil blankets to guard against the cold air. Kepler frowned as he watched another group of firefighters enter the hotel. At his direction, the police had cordoned off the ballroom and the dumpster area. Interviews were taking place of all the Ramesly family members. Kepler had finished talking with Lincoln Waters. He had gotten Waters' key for his hotel room and planned on having a thorough look before turning it over to the forensics team. He let Lincoln go, promising to be in contact for any further questions when Addison Ramesly had approached. After a momentary pause, the couple tearfully embraced, leaving no doubt as to who Addison had been seeing in the hotel earlier. Apparently, their secret marriage was now out for everyone to know. Why the secrecy? Kepler understood Addison's aversion to telling Nate. There were hospital records of how the man had treated his own wife during their marriage, even though charges had never been laid. Had Nate threatened his sister as well? Even so, Nate had been dead for over a month. Surely Addison could have told her family without fear of repercussions. Then there was Garrett. Waters had said Addison was afraid of him as well. Waters couldn't or wouldn't expand on why his wife was afraid of her two brothers. There was nothing in Garrett's history to show any concern about him. No criminal record, no records of abusing others. Nothing at all. Kepler frowned. He would need to talk to Addison later to understand her fear of Garrett Ramesly. There was something here, Kepler knew. He had seen Gabe whispering furiously to Garrett while he had been confiscating passports earlier today. There was something happening under the surface of Garrett. Kepler would pry further into his life to see what he could find. His phone buzzed. Kepler put it to his ear. "Kepler." "I managed to track down Henry Ramesly," a voice said in his ear. It was one of the many police officers Kepler had delegated to. Kepler couldn't even remember the man's name. They had a cyber breach. Someone hacked the system and erased everything. Benjamin Ramesly is trying to get new equipment in because the other equipment is compromised. Kepler bit back the urge to swear. It was too neat, in his opinion. It wasn't a coincidence the footage of the bomber was missing. "If they manage to recover the footage, I want to be the first to know." "Understood," the police officer stated before Kepler hung up on him. "Bill?" came a familiar voice from behind him. Kepler forced a pleasant expression to his face. "Deputy Director Eps, how good to see you." Epps shook Kepler's proffered hand. He had his usual entourage of FBI lackeys with him. "I heard we had a bombing here." "Yes. A man was coerced into wearing a bomb vest. The threat has been contained and no one was hurt." Kepler updated his superior. "Currently, I'm working with the local police to investigate further until more FBI resources were made available." "I have brought a team with me," stated Epps. "I've decided to take over this investigation." "Excuse me? What prompted this?" Kepler gave Epps his full attention. "I assure you that isn't necessary." "I believe it is," noted Epps with some satisfaction. "I have given you a long leash on this investigation, and there needs to be some results. The governor is getting antsy. It's an election year, and his platform includes a stance on getting tough on crime. The Ramesleys and their constant media attention are starting to chafe him. While your contribution has been invaluable, you're now directed to turn all information over to me. I'm taking the lead on this case as a personal favor to the governor." "Sir, if there's something I have done," questioned and irritated Kepler before he was interrupted. "As I said, your contribution has been invaluable." The annoyed eyes of Epps met his. "However, I intend to wrap this up in a more timely fashion. The results have come back from the financial investigations, correct?" "Yes," admitted Kepler as he gritted his teeth. The results had come back, yet what was on paper wasn't necessarily what was reality. Kepler didn't fully believe what the conclusions were. He had decided to dig deeper before pressing charges, which was part of why Kepler had been confiscating passports so none of the Ramesleys could flee as he delved further into their financial lives.
Good. You can update me with the cliff notes,
decided Eps. He turned to one of his lackeys.
Get some coffee for me and Kepler here.
How do you take your coffee? Questioned the lackey.
Black,
ground out Kepler. He knew Eps had already gone over the reports. He would also have gone over the conclusions and Kepler's reservations. Eps was the type of guy who liked to do his homework on cases, especially those cases he interfered in.
Drug money was laundered through each of the Ramesly companies in America. I have orders not to prosecute anyone on the hospital side except for James Ramesly, since he made a plea bargain with those stipulations. Robert, Oscar, and David were all charged with drug running and money laundering. David was murdered at the hospital. The autopsy showed his heart was stopped with a cardioplegic drug administered through an intravenous line.
Where are we with charging anyone for the murder? Asked Eps.
There was little physical evidence, grimaced Kepler. Video footage was erased. The scene was contaminated with multiple medical persons. There were no witnesses, as I believe the murderer disguised himself as one of the medical staff and went undetected.
You put in a requisition to dig up the body of Nate Ramesly, observed Eps.
He presented as a heart attack, even though he has no history of heart disease, revealed Kepler. If David Ramesly had not been in protective custody and had the autopsy, he too might have presented as a heart attack. I want to know for certain if Nate's death was natural, or if we have a serial killer amongst the Ramesly clan.
Seems like a bit of a jump in conclusions, grimaced Eps. He accepted his take-out cup from the lackey.
Considering someone has been poisoning Henry Ramesly, there's a distinct possibility one of the Ramesleys is cleaning up any loose ends,
dryly stated Kepler as he took his own coffee.
I read the report on Henry Ramesly, replied Eps. It all happened overseas, not our jurisdiction.
True, reluctantly allowed Kepler.
However, it still plays into what is happening in the Ramesly family. Where are we on arrests for the financial side, besides the family patriarchs?
Eps wanted to know.
I want this investigation wrapped up when it comes to the money laundering and drug running. The murders are a side event at this point. Perhaps we can stick that crime on one of the sons who was involved in the money laundering. Christian Gaines was arrested from Ramesly Pharmaceuticals, responded Kepler. He and David have been involved in the money laundering from the beginning. Noah Ramesly is now head of the company. There's no proof Noah had any knowledge of what was occurring until we stepped in with our investigations. What about Michael Ramesly? He was head of the company while funds were being laundered, mentioned Eps. He waved an agent over. Get me a report on the bomb ASAP. I want to know what materials, how big the payload is, and who to arrest by sundown.
The agent nodded before scurrying away.
Michael was head of the company. He had already started an investigation into the accounting based on discrepancies he found, noted Kepler, ignoring the interruption from Eps. I hardly think he had anything to do with the illicit money when he was investigating it himself. Unless he thought the FBI or police might be onto him, and Michael preemptively tried to make himself look innocent, Eps theorized. Michael isn't necessarily that smart, muttered Kepler.
He took a sip of the too-hot coffee and scalded his tongue.
Look, they all deserve to be heavily fined along with the companies. They were heads of their divisions and should have known what was happening. I cannot find any evidence of any of them profiting personally from the money laundering. The only one I think was actively involved was Nate Ramesly. He was essentially the head of the American Ramesly hotel chain. Oscar was just a face for the company. Oscar has not made any decisions or done any of the work for years now. It was Nate. No way could the money laundering have continued without his knowledge. Nate was our best suspect, and he is dead.
A dead man cannot be charged with a crime, observed Eps. He signed off on some paperwork one of the lackeys brought forward.
The governor isn't going to be satisfied with only hefty monetary fines. He wants further jail time. Money laundering is a crime. Only if they had intent and were involved in their father's schemes, retorted Kepler. Careful, Agent Kepler, warned Epps. You can't afford to become too involved in this case. I don't want to think you might be prejudicing the outcome because you happen to like the Ramesly family. I don't like the Ramesly family, growled Kepler. I just want to make certain justice is done. The FBI's reputation on building good cases is important. There's enough evidence to take each of them in for money laundering and being involved in the illicit proceeds of the drug trade, insisted Epps. As for the murder, we will exhume Nathaniel Ramesly and find out what we can. Otherwise, unless the killer strikes again, there's little we can do without further evidence. We can wait, replied Kepler. We can observe, lay a trap, and find out who was helping David Ramesly. Jumping forward because the governor is impatient means we might make mistakes which would cost us convictions in the courts later. Epps had a long drink of coffee before looking at Kepler with annoyance. The governor is running for re-election now. The vote is this month. He doesn't care if the conviction sticks. He wants us to throw everything we have at the Ramesleys and arrest them. It will play well to the public. So now we're a tool for the political elite rather than the citizens of this country? Questioned Kepler in icy restraint. We always have been, Bill, stated Epps. Is that going to be a problem for you? There's a promotion on the line for you, and I would hate to have to defer it because of your political leanings. Let me think about it, said Kepler as he ground his teeth. Don't think too long or hard, advised Epps. It would be unfortunate to demote you instead. You're a good agent. They both fell into silence, watching as the all-clear was given so that people could re-enter the hotel. Firefighters started loading up, getting ready to leave. Most of the ambulances had been unneeded and began the process of leaving as well. Only one person had been brought to hospital that Kepler was aware of, a juvenile female who had a knee injury. Otherwise, the evacuation had run somewhat smoothly, considering it was a bomb threat. Kepler supposed that it was a credit to Henry and Garrett Ramesly with how they had trained their staff. Guests slowly started to make their way back into the hotel. Kepler could see Ben pacing while talking on a cell phone, likely ordering new computer equipment. Garrett was talking to staff from the Waters Hotel across the road. Several of the Ramesly guests were warming up in the Waters lobby. He didn't see Drew or Molson Colburn, but the rest of the Ramesleys seemed to be talking together in a tight-knit group. They were probably discussing the events of the day and trying to figure out what to do about it. He had not seen Molson all day, he reflected. Kepler frowned. Molson had been the only one missing during the hostage situation. Waters had mentioned the bomber told him to listen to further instructions after the list was complete. How had Waters described the man who had put the bomb on him? An inch shorter than Waters. That was plausible. White and not overweight. Molson certainly fit that description. Brown eyes. What color were Molson Colburn's eyes? Kepler didn't know. He needed to find out. More than that, he needed to put a ski mask on Molson and have him repeat instructions in front of Lincoln Waters to know if he was the bomber. The only flaw was Kepler couldn't think of any reason Molson would want to harm the Ramesly family. Sure, he and his brother, Drew, were illegitimate sons of David Ramesly. The Colburns weren't technically part of the Ramesly family, but had been included more and more in the Ramesleys' activities. Molson had even helped to clear his half-brother Michael's name when the FBI had erroneously arrested him for drug trafficking after Michael was framed by David. Why would Molson suddenly want to harm them? Kepler saw no motive, nor did he believe Molson had the expertise to create a bomb. Then again, Kepler was assuming Molson was a sane human being. He was a son to Margaret Colburn, unaffectionately nicknamed Wacko Margot. Kepler would have to find out what Molson had been doing and see if he had an alibi before clearing him from the list of possible suspects. With a glance at Epps, Kepler decided not to divulge this piece of information. Let Epps try to discover it on his own.
Kepler wasn't a fan of the Ramesly family. However, he felt he had a good idea of who was innocent versus who was likely to be engaging in criminal activities. Proving it was another matter. Kepler also had a strong sense of justice. He didn't like Eps' ultimatum. Yet, was he ready to tank his career over it? Not really. Perhaps the courts would settle it properly. The Ramesly family certainly could afford the best in lawyers. Arresting the head of the companies would be the only thing the FBI could do at the moment. It would be up to the prosecution to determine how far the charges went. It really wasn't Kepler's job to judge who was innocent or guilty. He was only to collect evidence. The Ramesly family group started to make their way inside the hotel, no doubt seeking somewhere warmer to continue their discussions. For a moment Kepler envied them. It would certainly be better than standing out in the cold winter wind. Kepler took a drink of his coffee, which had cooled to a drinkable temperature. He made a decision. Kepler turned to Eps. Prosecuting the Ramesleys isn't a problem for me. I would like the promotion right away, though. Always the negotiator, muttered Eps. I suppose you want a pay raise, too. Pretty standard with the promotion, wryly noted Kepler. Done. You should wait until Boxing Day or the day after to make arrests, suggested Kepler. You just agreed not to go soft on the Ramesleys, frowned Eps. Why wait when they're all here right now and easy pickings? Sterling Denver just married into the family, revealed Kepler. Bad press to arrest them on Christmas Day in front of their kids. The governor wouldn't want public sympathy to be swayed by sentimentality of a holiday gone wrong. He would probably appreciate waiting a day or two so he can come out the hero and not the villain. Good suggestion, grunted Eps. He crumpled up his coffee cup and handed it off to one of the agents hovering nearby. Tomorrow or the next day. I want you personally in charge of the arrests. Don't disappoint me, Bill. If you enjoyed this chapter of Book 10 of the Ramesly Brothers series, The Wedding, look for other books on Audible or the ebooks or paperbacks on Amazon of the Ramesly series. Thank you and happy listening.